Hello, everybody. Welcome to the sixth episode of the iDebates server. Today we are going to be debating the motion, should churches be tax exempt? Arguing in the affirmative of that motion is going to be NashGoldJr. He is an atheist, to my knowledge, and also a leftist. Arguing against the motion is going to be TheGayMenace, who also adheres to the same labels as Nash. The debate will last an hour, and it will be immediately followed by 30 minutes for audience Q&A if anybody wants to ask some questions. Each debater can take up to 5 minutes to present an opening argument, after which they can each take up to 10 minutes to present a rebuttal to their opponent's opening argument. After the rebuttals have concluded, we'll enter the open dialogue phase where they'll have 20 minutes just to talk back and forth. After the dialogue, they'll have 5 minutes to present a closing argument, and then we will enter the Q&A. They know the rules. No direct insults, no profanities or vulgarities that are in excess. I will do my best to just hold them to that. It'll be my discretion whether or not to interview vulgarities and whatnot, but I think that they'll both be mature. That to the person arguing in the affirmative is Nash, so he's going to be going first this evening. And Nash, you may start your opening argument when you're ready.
All right, so when we talk about should churches be tax exempt, we have to say yes, because America was founded on the idea of the separation of church and state and the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. It was stated by Chief Justice Warren in Waltz versus Tax Commission of the Tax Commission of the City of New York. The exemption creates only a minimal and remote involvement between church and state, and far less than taxation of churches. It restricts the fiscal relationship between church and state and tends to complement and reinforce the desired separation, insulating each from the other. So what he's saying there is that when we don't tax churches, churches don't get to have say in the state, and the state doesn't get to have the say in the church, which is exactly what America is founded on. We know that another reason is that churches are nonprofit, and just like if we were allowed to tax churches, we'd be allowed to, tax other nonprofits like Red Cross or Meals for Wheels or St. Jude's. We have to make sure that these are fair for everyone, all nonprofits, especially when churches carry out very beneficial social programs like feeding the hungry or doing soup kitchens or giving homeless people shelter, et cetera, et cetera. To tax the church would be kind of like to double tax the people going there, because when you tax them but they don't see any direct benefit from it, it's essentially a double tax work. So you can't double tax the people going there and the people doing it, especially then if you tax churches. A lot of the small town churches, I live in a small town, there are a bunch of churches that just seat, like, I swear to God, like 20 people. If you tax them, there's people who might have to go out of their way just to participate in religious ceremonies, and I feel like that would be creating an undue burden on those people to go participate in their religion the way they want to. That concludes my opening statement.
Hello? Okay, I'll just start now. I can't hear Omen.
Neither can I. So yeah, you can just go ahead.
Okay. So I would agree with you on the small town church. I don't think we should tax. However, there are churches that aren't small town. There are churches that are, for all intents and purposes, business. Joel Osteen, since the most famous example, is a televangelist, millionaire, bought a private jet. He's taken money from it to pay for his lifestyle. He's bought $1 million stadiums to fill with thousands of people, and doesn't do much charity work. The charity work he says he does, the charity work he writes off, is him going to the churches he owns. During, as Oman says, interrupting and making it seem like this is hollow. during Hurricane Harvey, he wouldn't even allow for people to go into the church and use it as a shelter. He is essentially, and also he charges costs for admission. If you see those little packets, those little like the wine and cracker thing,
The communion?
this is a commodification of religion. He doesn't run a church, he runs a business. I don't think the government should have the power, however, to say what is a church and what is a business. I feel like that's too much. In terms of the argument from the Constitution, we also have the Dred Scott. Things can be overturned, things can be changed. And I think they should in this. Joel Osteen is commodifying religion. He's not doing any charitable work with the money he takes in. He's spending millions on corporate assets, private jets. I don't see why he should be tax exempt. Furthermore, because I don't believe the government should be able to decide who is a business and who is a religion, even though I would personally say Joel runs a business, not a church. I would say from here, we should probably find a way to go about this that allows small churches to operate fairly easily, and large churches to not be commodifying religion, and especially taking advantage of very, very vulnerable people, especially with the faith thing. So, as a solution, I would propose a very progressive tax. Maybe for the first, however much is found to be the average cost to maintain a church in an area, it's 0%. Maybe even a negative lowest income. Probably not, but if it's found that can be afforded, then possibly. And from there, after you hit and then maybe a maximum church can bring in. There's no reason why Joel Osteen should take in $2 million from his. He doesn't need that much. He's not doing that much charity. He's not ending world hunger. He's not even really helping. So basically, my point is the government can't decide what is a church and what is a business, because that opens up a lot of, that's very close to just establishing an official recognized religions list, which is not okay. And
1 minute, buddy.
As a result, I think that the best way to go about it would be to have a very progressive tax system on churches. That's it.
Okay, Nash, at this time you can take up to 10 minutes to rebut what he just said in his opening argument. Go.
Okay, so I'm not going to say this was the whole of your argument, but most of your argument is arguing that the fact that Joel Osteen and other televangelist people who run megachurches bring in shit tons of money and end up profiting on the commodities that they sell. And I'd agree with you that Joel Osteen is a piece of shit and other televangelists are pieces of shit and they don't deserve to be tax exempt, but it's the pastors that should be taxed. It's the pastors that should be taxed on their income, because they're taking money away from these nonprofits and putting it into their own pockets, which should be considered taxable income, not just, but, a pastor passing around an offering plate isn't some kind of corporate workaround to find all the tax loopholes in the world to make as much money as they want. These are people who are just trying to upkeep and maintain their church. I know you said that you weren't necessarily against that, but it's just what's happening. The other part is that I don't think that if you don't tax megachurches, you necessarily set a national faith, one that in which the government is promoting, because you're right, the government is not allowed to promote or hinder any religion under federal law. They can't make laws promoting or hindering one or the other. But if you don't tax any of them, you're not promoting or hindering, because they're all on equal ground. If you were to just tax Christian megachurches, it would be specifically rules against the Christian religion. I don't think you're arguing that we should tax only Christian megachurches, but megachurches in general. I know I said that in the Constitution, according to the First Amendment, free expression in the Establishment Clause, you pointed out that sometimes Supreme Court cases get overturned or get superseded by other Supreme Court cases. While this is very true, it would be a lot more difficult for the First Amendment because A, it's a Bill of Rights issue, and B, it's black letter law. It's not interpretive law. When the Constitution says that the government can't promote or hinder any kind of religion through federal law, it just actually says that. You don't have to interpret it or extrapolate it from the words. It just straight up tells you that. It's like the right to bear arms. It just straight up tells it to you. The money, I understand where you're coming from through the a maximum amount a church is allowed to take in before being considered selling a commodity or before being considered a business where you have to start paying back. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think the money you're bringing in should speak to how much social programs you're putting out. I'm not necessarily opposed to one church making more money than the other and neither paying taxes, as long as the one making more money is doing more for the community. So, yeah, I think I got every point there, so I will pass it off to TheGayMenace.
Okay. I know the rules. So no, I don't. I'm saying church colloquially, like any temple plays a role, right? There is a Hindu televangelist thing.
Yeah, Deepak Chopra sucks ass.
Hey, Nash, don't interrupt, please.
I know all I know about ISKCON. You know, they have brainwashing, child abuse, and murder cases against them. Pretty bad stuff. But when I say so, I don't think the government should be able to say anyone is or is not a church or a business. I think that would be close to saying, okay, that would be close to giving the government the ability to say this is a religion, this isn't, and that's too close to saying something is or is not what's it called, like an official religion. I don't like that. Furthermore, when I say a maximum income, I mean like after you make $1 million, every penny gets here. If you use that money on charity, that's fine. Like that's exempted, right? Like the idea of all churches being considered non-profit isn't really, well, it's just not. It doesn't represent the world. And if we want to just look at Joel Osteen doesn't own a private. He just has one that he can use whenever he wants because it's owned by his church. He doesn't have all of his stuff. The church does, and the church is totally taxed. So when you want to bring up like basically what I'm saying is, since we can't say what is and is not a church, because that would be very close to actually having the government, decide what is a valid and isn't a valid religion. A maximum amount of income that a church can make, I think, is the best solution. That's about does it for my rebuttal.
Fair enough. You guys can both have up to 20 minutes to talk to each other, starting now.
So what's up?
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear him say starting now. He cut out, but go ahead with your first.
No, you can start. Oh, okay.
Sorry, somebody walked into the room. With your point that the government shouldn't be able to tell what is and is not what is a church and what is a business, they shouldn't be able to decide what is and isn't that. We already have that with what we do, just by saying all churches are churches and therefore are tax exempt.
Yeah.
So we already do that. It's just that we don't get the we don't tax any church, and that includes letting people like Joel Osteen or these Hindu televangelists get away with swindling their, huddled masses. But there's cons with considering all of them, businesses, and saying that they should all be taxed, because then there are churches that really do a lot of good for the community that might not be able to do as much good or get shut down entirely simply because they had the audacity to preach what they believe.
Wait, okay. How would putting a maximum income cap $1 million prevent any church from doing, especially when you have charitable givings being deducted?
So even if a church makes $1 million, they don't have to necessarily buy commodities with that.
You're saying they could use it to fund things like missionary services and so forth and so on?
Right.
Those are also charitable giving and could be.
Right, but a missionary service isn't exactly, a private jet or a 400 million acre house.
Yeah, and those things, the IRS would create a tax, to, they would create a tax code to say, private jet, no, missionary service to Africa, yes, so forth and so on, and they'd go over. And if a church had a problem with it and they wanted to demonstrate, hey, this is something that actually helps us help other people, they could then go to court with the IRS for it.
But it should be the other way around. The IRS should have to go to court with the church and say that that is not charitable before you can just tax them from out of nowhere.
Well, it wouldn't be taxed. The code would be made known. So if Joel Osteen wanted to sell one of his private jets because he could only afford paying taxes on the other, I don't know how many he has, then he would be able to. Laws don't just get snapped in by fucking Thanos.
Right, but even so, it should be not so much the IRS telling you that these services don't help the community, but whether or not the things you have are considered for personal use or for church use. So when Joel Osteen buys a ridiculously expensive house, you can say that isn't for church use unless he's renting it out to all the homeless people where he is, which he's obviously not.
Except he can, and he has, and he's written off so much fucking stuff for being tax exempt because it has to do with him going to church. He has claimed that he is the one who makes churches work. He is the only minister that can make churches work. So he has to travel between them very quickly. So he has to have a private jet. So he has to have big, huge houses over. I don't think that's cool. I don't think that you should have literally tens of millions of dollars invested in something like that when you don't put any towards charitable giving. I don't think the government should look at that and say this is a.
Which is why the government should be able to look at it and say that it's not. They're just not allowed to right now.
Well, yeah, I think they should be allowed. I think they should be allowed to say, okay, you have $10 million in assets. Maybe not a wealth tax, but you could private jet tax, and property and more ability to things would be good.
Right, but that should be against the person, not against the church.
But the thing is, he doesn't own the private jet. He doesn't own the man. The church does.
Right, but the government should be able to step in and say, hey, it's not the church that's using that house, it's you using that house.
Yeah, they could, but the government has no say on it. If he claims the church is he claims the church is the one who owns it, he's won that court case already. Double jeopardy. You have to change the law.
Right, and I'm not saying the law shouldn't be changed to fuck over people like Joel Osteen. I don't like Joel Osteen as much as the next guy, but
could I propose a way to change it would be to put a tax on churches that make more than $1 million or have more than $1 million.
I think it would have to be
with the deduction of charitable givings included. So like if you had a church that like 100,000 people went to, and they all gave a bunch, right? So they brought in $1 million, but they also paid for the cure to AIDS or whatever, right? that would still be fine because they would have spent all their money. They would have spent all their money on charitable giving.
Right. I'm not totally opposed to that, but I mean,
Well, that's what I'm arguing.
It's hard for you to draw yeah, but arguing that mega churches should be taxed and churches should be taxed are two very different things. Because if you tax a church, you have to tax you have to tax mosques and temples and other places of worship.
Temples should be taxed. Things that religious organizations that bring in more than $1 million. Hell, I would love to tax the Church of Scientology. That would be the funniest thing in the universe. Because I'm pretty sure they'd blow. They'd just explode. Right? Like saying that all religious organizations bringing in more than $1 million. I mean, you might have to make an exception because of the way that they fund the creation of mosques in the West via one organization that all mosques pull out of. So you might have to write an exception for that just because of the way it's done. Yeah, no. I don't really see how that could become a problem. If you have a $1 million limit, I mean, if a small town church is making $1 million, the federal government needs to look into it one way or another, because it's either a cult or smuggling drugs.
Well, I mean, if they're smuggling drugs, they're probably not going to put it on their taxes. But
I mean,
I don't know. I find
I'm more afraid of the DEA than the IRS. I mean, I'm more afraid of the IRS than the DEA.
The same. But I find an inherent problem with the idea that the government can step in and say, you make too much money and I don't believe your assets are for enough charitable use and therefore the church gets taxed.
Well, that's how taxes work. So you have a problem with taxing?
No, I don't have a problem with taxing. I have a problem with taxing churches. Because if you tax any church, let's say you tax Joel Osteen's church, right? He now gets to go, okay, because I'm getting taxed, I now get representation in the government.
And he does.
So
I'm pretty sure Joel Osteen lobbies.
Joel Osteen probably does lobby because he's a person. You can lobby as a person, but he would now get to lobby as a church.
He lobbies for his church against televangelists, against anti-televangelist laws.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be considered,
involved in politics.
But it wouldn't just be if you okay, let's say you tax Joel Osteen and you tax you tax the mega mosques and the Mormon temples. Politics now becomes a free-for-all between religions, and I don't think it is. I think it's a free-for-all between money grubbers.
One of the main reasons we support Israel is, well, not main reasons, but one of the reasons, like in this weird sort of why people vote for it, is this evangelist idea that they have to occupy Israel or else the rapture. Like that was a legitimate thing that Christian churches were like spouting way back in the day. Like this is a real thing. Crazy religious
But crazy religious people, although yes, they have a loud voice and sometimes they can be problematic in politics, they usually aren't the biggest ones. The biggest problems are the people like the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers aren't running around going, man, Jesus is so fucking cool. They're going around going, what political actions could I take that would make me the most money?
I'm pretty sure Trump said he was the chosen one of God.
Literally, so did George Bush. They're all idiots.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's like, dude, yeah, so that like negates your point. We already have religion in some sense in politics.
But here's the problem.
Joel Osteen is essentially the church, right? Like he is the only leader. He's everything, right? He is lobbying. We already have religion in the government. We haven't had a single president who was non-religious.
Right, but there's no problem with, a politician being religious.
I'm saying
that doesn't mean
permeates the political structure of America, and attempting to keep it out with this it's like you're trying to turn off the bathtub when it's already flooded. The house is flooded. You're turning off the sink on a sinking Titanic.
Okay, but here's the thing. I disagree with you on that point. I don't think religion is this just permeating. I think people use religion as a kind of pathos argumentative device,
And what's
but
the
that
difference
doesn't.
between that and what Joel's like?
I'm sorry. What's the difference between that and what?
And what Joel's saying is that's religion, dog. Religion as a pathos device. That's what it is. Religion is a pathos device being used still.
Right, but what we don't have in America is a theocracy.
And you think taxing churches with more than $1 billion, even though they're already lobbying, even though they're already involved in politics as they possibly could be, even though we have
But there's the key phrase: as they possibly could be. If
you
you
think
tax
Joel
them,
Osteen
that
is going to
extent
coup the
goes
government?
way farther.
Wait, what do you think? Wait, do you think Joel Osteen is currently limited in his ability because he isn't taxed?
He's limited by the laws that apply to him. Yes,
What laws?
laws against promoting religions in. Sorry, I had to get a drink. Laws against churches. I actually don't know how many laws there are.
There aren't any. Churches are not restricted under any way, shape, or form. Literally, here.
In politics?
Wait, yeah, they're not. They're really not. Like we have, I'm pretty sure it might be Mississippi. Some southern piece of shit is now making it. You had to take a Christian religion class in public school, and that's technically not okay. But do you know what?
Yeah,
but wait, do you want to know something? They're not afraid because religion has permeated the people who picked the Supreme Court judges, like Mike Pence, who was literally picked to get the evangelical vote, right, for Donald Trump, and they picked people who wouldn't do anything against it because religion, as a pathos device or not as a pathos device, is still going to permeate politics. We're not going
But
to get a
here's the thing:
theocracy just because we
the
steal
exact.
money from Joel.
But the thing you just said is like the whole reason that intelligent design as a whole got shot down in a majority of all places was that most courts said that that is religious teachings.
Yeah.
So the church is limited in some way in acting in government because the church can't teach religious ideologies in public schools. They can't teach. There you go, Kitzmiller versus Dover. That's one of them.
I don't think Oman was agreeing with you on that.
Well, Kitzmiller versus Dover says that teachers can't lead students in public prayer. They can't force you into the prayer of the religion of your choice.
They also can't force you to stand up for the flag. They can't force you to show anything like that. That's not okay. No, that is not true. Actual racist is Eric. I bet my left nut on it. No, no, absolutely. Joe Osteen is not going to coup the U.S. government because we make him pay some taxes on his 7 private jets or whatever. It ain't happening, dog.
But it gives him the ability to push more influence.
He already lobbies. What more does he have to do?
I can go lobby. I won't be very good at it, but I could go lobby.
He has a bunch of money which he got from his church, and he lobbies for his church. Okay, so that happens, right? What more influence can you have without forming a paramilitary organization or political party?
Oh, okay, but here's the thing: if you tax churches, they would be allowed to form a political party.
Wait, they are currently.
The church is not a political party.
It isn't, but nothing is like stopping them. Oh man, I think actual racist. I don't have any proof for it. It just he strikes me as it.
Yeah, you keep cutting out.
But no, like this is this idea that they would have more political clout or more political ability. You'd have to show me that they're lacking some right now. Like in the education system, fine, I'll give you that one. Do you think making them pay taxes is going to give them the ability to say we we should be able to force people to learn about our religion. We can't even force people to take sex ed courses, dog. What do you think we're going to force them to do?
Okay, but if they say we're taxed, we should be able to teach our children what we want to teach them in public school because we help fund the public schools. You now have to fight that battle all over again.
Well, no, because public schools are funded out of property tax. Don't give them property tax.
If you tax properties that Joel Osteen owns that he says the churches own, congratulations, those are now funded by his property tax, the church's property tax.
Only if they make more than $1 million.
Right? Joel Osteen, I promise you, does.
No, I don't think that's an argument that people could make. Honestly, like they could make it. I don't think it's an argument they could win because you'd have to teach. You would have to because the court deemed it to be not science, right? Like you can't just say. You can't. You'd have to push for the school not to teach religion, but for it to teach things that it considers to be not fact. Right?
Well, I'm sure they consider it fact.
Well, no, schools in science generally don't consider religion fact.
Right, but let's say you go to a history class and they have to teach you about the gospel.
Wait, they already teach you about Christianity.
They teach you about Christianity, but they don't go, now listen guys, we're going to spend the next 4 weeks going over all the evidence supporting Jesus' resurrection.
Do you mean a religious studies class? Like Mississippi just did, because politics has already influenced the system to the point where we can have...
I have no idea
Mississippi, I think it was Mississippi. One of those states made a religious studies class mandatory. But religious studies doesn't necessarily mean only study. It's the religious studies that we both know I'm talking about. It's basically the teacher going up there and saying, "Look, Jesus, you have to accept him into your heart, please. I remember when I accepted Jesus."
Hey, you guys are getting a little bit off topic. Mind going back to the taxes thing? Also, you have about 3 minutes.
Okay, basically the idea that schools aren't allowed to teach about religion is already it's already got this. It's already messed up because they can. All they have to do is get people who want to pander to religious people in office, and people can already lobby, and mega churches do lobby. So if they can lobby, if they lobby for things to be put into school curriculum, if they already do these things, what are they not allowed to do that you're afraid they're going to do if we make them pay?
So again, it's the idea of taxation without representation. You would have people formally going out representing churches, acting in the greatest ideals of churches. I don't agree with you that right now that politicians are just going around going, what would be the best thing for the Christian church right now? Because you would slowly work it if there were enough people like that being lobbied to, working in the active interest of churches, which the federal government is
1 minute, guys.
Say that you can't work in the best interest of any Christian church or any church for that matter of fact.
It doesn't say that though. We literally have people already lobbying, which is literally acting in the best interest.
Lobbying is not being a politician.
It's pretty much being a politician. We have Mike Pence, who literally signed the Reaffirmation of Religious Protections Act or whatever it was.
And so protecting religions is absolutely allowed.
Wait, no, this is the one that allowed people to discriminate based on sexuality.
30 seconds.
Pretty messed up.
I mean, yes, it is pretty messed up, but under all technicalities, under federal government, LGBT is not considered a protected class.
No, I mean, you're right. My point is that people acting in the best interest of religion already exist, and there's no one to stop it from existing.
But even the Supreme Court ruled that, you have to take into account religious beliefs before telling a business you can or cannot do something, because their religious beliefs have to be upheld as well.
So, we already have people acting in the interest.
I'll let you go ahead and respond to that, and then we'll go to the closing.
My point is, well, we can go right into closing, because, I was going to close that. So.
Alrighty. At this time, since Nash, you went first for the opening, Menace, you will go first for the closing. You have up to 5 minutes to give a closing argument.
Basically, your argument seems to be that if we tax religious organizations, they can have a say in government, more of a say in the government, as well as that it would possibly hurt religious organizations that do good. I don't see that being the case if you put it as a maximum wealth tax or a maximum income tax. And the idea that they're going to have more power, I don't really see that being a problem unless they try to overthrow the government or create a political party, which likely isn't going to happen considering how difficult it is to have a third party in America. And also, these mega churches hurt people. I didn't get to that point, so it's kind of unfair for me to bring it up, but they do hurt people, and that's not okay. And to allow something which is hurting people and commodifying God, as well as just generally being involved in politics already, and to not tax that is nonsensical to me. They're already in politics. We have nothing to lose. That's my closing.
Nash, you're good to go, man. You got up to 5 minutes.
All right, so my point is that you may not think that there is a lot more that religions and churches could be doing in politics. I would posit that there is a lot more they could be doing. When you say that it's really hard to create a political party, that's because it's a third-party political party. That's because it's really hard to make another political party that people haven't already heard of or sided with. But if you make a political party that is the Christian political party, I promise you that political party would do incredibly well. And if a Christian political party pops up and says we are going to act in the best interest of the church and do our best to get as close to a Christian theocracy as possible, there are people that would absolutely agree with a Christian theocracy. And I don't want that to happen. It's the fact that these places could say, it doesn't mean that they would actually win or that they would, or that the people would agree with them in these cases, but people like Joel Osteen could be, well, if my church property is getting taxed, my property taxes pay for the schools, and therefore I want Christian classes, specifically Christian classes in these schools. Now, I understand where you're coming from, because I agree with you that megachurches hurt people. I don't like megachurches. I'm an atheist just like you, but in the end, you have to treat all churches fairly, because if you don't treat all churches fairly, even especially if you just want this, well, they're not allowed to make upwards of $1 million. They can still make more than $1 million and say, oh, well, we're doing all these social services and that's worth what I'm making. Or I promise you that with every tax law that you put in there, there's a loophole to sign it. That's my rebuttal.
Close. But yeah.
Closal, yeah, whatever.
Throw questions at us. Oh man, we can't hear you. Oh man, died.
Is Oman not here again?
No, I'm here. I was just wanting for anybody I was waiting for people to say they want to ask a question, but I probably should have prompted that. If you have a question, go ahead and type 1 in the chat room and I'll put you in the queue. Going once. Going twice. Going 3 times. Alright, nobody has any questions for you guys. So that either means both unbearably boring, or you answered every possible contention anybody could think of.
Well, we did just discuss every possible thing with the separation of church and state, right?
That's fair.
Like, no one could ever have a unique thought outside of what we said.
That's probably what happened. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and unlock the voice chat. So everybody is now allowed to come in and talk.
Except
if you
Dan.
are server muted, all you got to do is disconnect and reconnect and pop in. I'll try and take it.
That was really good, guys.
Thanks. Can you put me back as moderator? Because I want to server mute Dan.
Why?
You can't server mute Dan because Dan's a super moderator.
Fuck.
I mean,
Release
maybe
me from
you
this
can,
mortal
but he
coil.
can just unmute himself because, again, he's a mod.
Ah,
Okay.
All right.
that was fun.
Everybody
Yeah.
struggles. Everybody struggles.
Dude, Ted Cruz is like literally a theocratic bastard.
Yeah, but nobody likes Ted Cruz.
He literally almost won.
Until Trump said that his dad helped kill JFK, which for some reason boosted Trump's numbers.
Okay,
What?
wait. The only reason that boosted his numbers is because everyone who liked Ted Cruz instantly died. It was like when conservative girls said, "Just stop being
Not being
poor."
That's
poor.
weird as hell. I'm not gonna lie.
I just instantly died.
Oh yeah,
Ted
did
is
you
the
hear?
worst human being on earth.
Did you hear Trump's newest thing where he said we're building a we're building a wall in Colorado?
You got to keep
Because-
those New Mexicos in.
Because he
You can't
apparently
have
thinks
New
that
Mexicans with the old Mexicans.
there's too many Mexicans, man.
Oh, he's